Here are all the bits and pieces for my 1022, the old Ruger semi. It started out as a stock OEM carbine from factory, and now there are only two OEM parts, the bolt and the receiver. Everything else has been replaced in some way or another. This started out as a project to actorize the carbine barrel with a heavy barrel, which moved me to switching out the stock, moved me to switching out the trigger, and so I guess we'll start with the barrel here. The barrel is pretty easy to swap out, just fits right on into your receiver, and it's held into place with the Ruger V-Lock block. And it just sits right on in there. Just take your two little walking screws, and you just tighten those guys down. There's a bit of debate as far as what the torque setting is on these. I usually run it right around 15 to 18, which seems to be the common consensus on them. All right, there we go. So then I'll take our bit here, we'll torque it down for good measure, make sure we start on the 0. Again, there's a bit of debate as far as how heavy you want to go. I'm going to go to 18, because that sounds about right. There we are. Simple as that to get your barrel installed. If you're swatching out to a heavy barrel like this, you'll have to change out the stock because the contour of the barrel won't fit into the original carbine stock. So next we'll put our bolt in, which is always the tricky bit. Put in your charging handle. Once you have your charging handle and your bolt in, you're ready to go. This is the Ruger BX22 trigger, so it gives you a lighter trigger pull. It's a little bit better than the factory. They're not the best triggers out there. They're not the lightest triggers, but they work very well. I've seen 100% reliability with them, so I haven't seen any sort of major issues with them. They're very similar cutouts to the original triggers as well, so really easy just to drop in. Alrighty, so the trick of the trigger is to make sure that your bolt release is down. Otherwise it'll stick into place and you won't be able to get your pins in correctly. Your little floppy bit here goes right on into the groove. That's a technical term, floppy bit. Pins stick right on in. Easy as can be. Right on into your stock. This is the Magpul X22 stock. I'm running just a standard 1022, so not the takedown version, although they do make a takedown version. All your components slip right on in. From there you have your one takedown nut. Again, some people fight over what the torque setting is on this. Since this is a plinker rifle, I'm not too concerned, so we use the good and tight. Not too tight though, we don't want to bend anything wrong. There, have yourself put back together 1022. And since I run a can most of the time, this A2 birdcage is more of a thread protector. I think it looks pretty neat. Again, just going to get it on there nice and tight. That should stick on there. Next we'll be installing our 1022 base. This is one of our Warne scope mount bases. It has a 15 MOA cant, so if you're shooting long distance, it does aid in your scope measurements there. So on these, you're going to make sure not to over torque it. We're going to recommend 15 inch-pounds. Since you have an aluminum receiver, you don't want to go much higher than that. Just a little dab of new Loctite, so semi-permanent Loctite to hold it in there. Perfect. So I will mention we use the blue semi-permanent Loctite only on the base. Since I'm not planning on swapping out this base anytime soon, it's a fairly permanent feature. So we're gonna stick it in there with that blue Loctite. That's something I don't use on the rings and don't recommend using on the rings especially. You'll change the torque setting and you could damage your scope. So it's important not to use it on your rings, only the base. Again, we're just finger tightening these just to get it in there, and then we'll torque it down to the right settings afterwards. So again, 15 inch-pounds. We have an aluminum receiver, so that's pretty easy to thread out. Again, we're just going to do them nice and easy each. Get them almost to the breaking point. We'll start going back and forth. Break. Go. Now we're set up on our 15 inch-pounds. Alrighty, so I'm putting back on my Crimson Trace scope. I like using the scope on this, but I use the quick detach rings. These are the Warne quick detach rings. I like those because I like to switch back and forth with the red dot. If we're doing like a speed steel competition, I'll put the red dot on, it's much faster. But usually the scope will live on there because I like to have magnified power. So now we're out at the range with my 1022. Right now we've got the scope on, the Crimson Trace 4-12 scope. We have the Warne Maxima quick detach rings. I like using the quick detach, at least on my 1022, because I also do steel competitions, so it's easy to rip that scope off and throw a red dot on if you're going to be shooting speed steel. It's easy to put back on and it'll hold zero for you. Again, we have our heavy barrel on us, our Magpul stock, and then of course the Warne bipod on the end of it there to help us get on zero and then start blinking. So for our quick detach rings, you're just doing finger tight. You just spin these little guys around until your rings are loose. And your scope will pop right off. Cool. So now our scope is off. I'm able to switch over to my red dot sight. I would tighten that up and I'm all set for speed steel. Easy enough to take that scope off, get your red dot on, and you're ready for a different type of match. Perfect. So to put your scope back on, you just align it in the same ridges, push forward on your scope, and then you're going to tighten down your little levers. There you go. And you're just going finger tight. You don't need to go crazy on the pressure. Just as long as your scope's on there good and tight, you're all set to shoot.